Welcome to the ANEW Insight podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogrammed Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. And Chantal Donnelly, physical therapist and author of Settled, How to Find Calm in a Stress-Inducing World. Here at City Club Los Angeles, we follow our guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Welcome back to the ANEW Insight podcast at City Club Los Angeles. We are back for the second half of our interview with physical preparation coach Tom Legath, otherwise known as Legs. Tom gave us some background information about his inspiration to become a leader in the sports conditioning industry, and we are ready to learn more. Tom, welcome back.
Thank you.
Your mission focuses on injury prevention and long-term athletic performance. What common training mistakes do you see that lead to injuries, and how do you address them?
Well, I just want to say first off, my mission really is to help the person achieve whatever they want. And one of the best ways to do that is make sure they don't get hurt, because it doesn't matter how much you can lift in the gym if you can't play or if you can't go about life, because training is really about, it's meant to enhance your life, or it's meant to enhance your skill or the way you play your sport or whatever. And so oftentimes I think that point is missed. It's not a punishment or anything like that. So sorry, I went off on a tangent. So the injury, what was the second part of that question?
It's about, I just wanted to training mistakes. Words. What do you see that leads to injuries? What kind of training mistakes are you noticing the most?
Well, there's a lot of overdoing it, I think, these days. There's a lot, speaking of the approach to training, there is this warrior mentality kind of thing that I think has a lot to do with American football. And that goes to what we spoke about earlier, where people maybe think they have to overcome their body or their background, or even if they start to feel some kind of something happening in the body that isn't, it could be interpreted as a signal that you need to stop training or it's going to be more severe. They think it's, to push through. That kind of attitude is off, especially in football. And that has started to branch out into other sports. But, you get applauded for being tough, right?
Yes. I think that's in our celebrity culture as well. When you see celebrities training for roles, you see them just going so hard and training all day long, and people think that that's the way.
The more the better, yeah. And that's there's a point where it's just gonna fall off a cliff. Like, that's not gonna work. And and you start to see it in all the word usages of all kinds of different sports. Like, I like auto racing, and I watched a race, and one of the drivers had the opportunity to win the race. They made a tactical error and he lost, but he said, "We got to get stronger, and we're going to come back and win." It's like, it has nothing to do with strength. Right. So that's kind of the second part of it. There's a tendency to just always think that you got to train more and more and more. And, the saying work smarter, not harder is really applicable. Learn to make better decisions in your training. And then there's a huge overemphasis on strength training, which I talked about a little bit earlier when I mentioned the athletic qualities of the Tudor Bompa was the first to talk about, and that Ian also references. And the physical qualities are 25% of the athletic qualities, and strength is only 25% of the physical qualities. So you're talking about, less than 25% of all potential training choices you could be making. And there is a lot of emphasis on strength is going to fix everything, and that just isn't how it works. Right. And then the last thing is, we talked about stretching, and you mentioned it, taking care of your body, and especially as you age, we are all on our way out, right? We ain't living forever. And no matter, even if we do things really, really well, we're still going to age.
Mm-hmm.
And our body is not going to be like it was when we were 20.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we get older, we do have to adopt different training habits. We can't go back to the training the way we were when we were 20,
Right.
when we're 50.
Well, what do you give as advice for people who are, in their 40s and 50s and 60s? What do they need to do to change?
I mean, you're probably a good person for them to talk to, because I'm sure you've met people that maybe they're holding on to some of their memories, or
Mm-hmm.
some ego things, or
Mm-hmm.
some insecurities, or who knows. That's really an individual thing that you want to learn about the person and why they might be making choices the way they are. But also, we talked about if they can feel the difference, then hopefully maybe that will inspire change.
Yeah.
But they just have to be open to doing things a different way, because just because you lead a horse to water, right, doesn't mean it's going to drink.
Right. So would you say it's scaling back, as you get older, scaling back on hardcore strength training, combining it with maybe more functional movement, such as, working your body to prevent falls and injuries, and then maybe adding more stretching? What would you suggest to somebody?
I understand. I'm going to do my best to give some general advice, but it really is an individual thing.
Mm-hmm.
An individual, if strength is what you do, it's important to individualize it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But the way the mainstream trains, you would be better off not doing it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I touched on it a little bit. The origin of the term functional comes from kind of a misunderstanding of Ian's work. Because what Ian said was that training should be sport specific. And what he meant is it should be specific to the individual and the sport they play.
Mm-hmm.
You don't train a skier the way you would train a endurance athlete, or a power lifter doesn't need to train like a soccer player, and so forth. And that got taken out of context. And going back to the marketing, the way the industry is really heavy on marketing, there was a equipment supply company that they realized if they created this term that they could create a market.
Mm-hmm.
And every year, since then, for the last 20 years, there are lots of different devices marketed as functional. So I probably wouldn't say to someone it needs to be more functional, because I think that we can just say it needs to be more individualized, and that's what that means. And then they definitely need more stretching. I mean, most people are very tight. I've never met anyone who is what I would accept as flexible. Even the people that do any kind of stretching usually do maybe like yoga or something. And even that's not that, I wouldn't put that as acceptable if we were working together. So take better care of your body, make better choices that are individual for you, and hopefully learn, like we mentioned earlier as well, to pay attention to what your body's telling you, and not just blindly accept what everyone else is doing is what you should be doing. Right.
So how would you customize a workout training program for, say, a 52-year-old man who may have had some injuries, like a knee injury from skiing in the past, and who wants to, become stronger and more flexible? What would you do with this person?
I mean, I understand where your question is coming from, but I think, and this isn't you, but this is what the mistake that's made by a lot of people. They think that limited a bit of information you gave me is enough for me to say, this is what you should do. So I would have no idea until I talked to that person. I can take a guess that some of the things I just talked about are probably going to help that person. But for me to really individualize it, I need to spend some time with them and really understand that the client and what they want and what they've done. And then we map it out together.
That's really great, though. I do think that that's important. I think it's essential in any kind of training. It's essential in psychology, in dietetics. We have to meet the client where they're at, really understand their history and their background, know what their injuries are, know what they are hoping for, to be able to formulate any kind of plan for them. And then we have to make something that they want to do. So it just sounds like you are really focused on creating an individualized program with anyone who walks into your door.
Yeah, exactly. Because you could take 6 people, like to use an example, lunges are really popular, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could take 6 people that are all of similar demographic, and they might all respond differently to doing that exercise.
Right.
So we're missing a huge opportunity if we assume that we know that this one exercise is right for them if we don't take the time to really find out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Now, you had mentioned that you are getting involved more so with sports teams. Tell me a little bit about that and who you're working with.
Well, in KSI, Ian's background is, he trained a lot of teams, so it's part of our program to learn how to do that. And we get to work with a lot of different teams in camps. I've worked with some soccer teams recently. I worked with 2 local high school soccer teams,
Mm-hmm.
and they had questions around training because half the team was injured.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked with swimmers. I've worked with tennis players. We've done a bunch of different basketball team sessions, volleyball. I mean, our approach, because we don't assume and prescribe, it's not it's not the prescription, it's a process. We can apply that blank sheet of paper philosophy to any sport
Mm-hmm.
and help them.
Mm-hmm. And so give me an example of, a sports team that you're working with so we can get an idea of that.
Well, the soccer team that I worked with, we talked about flexibility, and if a lot of the different sports that we've met over the years, it's really common that the amount of total training time in a week is really, really high.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of time dedicated towards stretching or doing other recovery work is very, very minimal.
Mm-hmm.
So I went in to work with this team, and I got to give them an exposure to some things they could do to take better care of their bodies if they choose to do that.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I want to know a little bit more about you personally. Now, I know that you are an avid gardener. I
Yeah.
want to hear about, what are you doing outside of training, and how did you get into gardening, and what else do you do that makes you you?
It's a good question. I bought a house in 2017. It was, having an apartment, you don't maybe, I don't think I felt like it was mine as much. I never had the mindset to try to change the, I don't know, the feng shui or however it is, whatever you want to say, the feel of it towards my liking. And then you bought a house, you're like, well, I can do all of these things. And I'm not really sure why I decided on gardening. Maybe because it was cheaper at the time, I guess. And so I just started kind of like digging and going to the nursery and really, really enjoyed it, and started like, I never thought of myself as like an artist in any way. But when I started doing a garden, I was kind of like, this is kind of like my art, because, I put plants together, and you get to create this environment, and then I learn how to take care of them. And sometimes they die, and then sometimes they don't. But it's the cycle of life, and it kind of became a representation of my inner self. And as I developed, the garden developed, and the garden was me. When I was working things out in my mind, I would be picking weeds or trimming or doing whatever. It was a very intertwined thing, kind of going back to the Taoist thing. I was connecting. And then when the pandemic hit, I was, like a lot of people, I didn't have as much to do. And trying to find things to do, they have all those spicy challenges, like the Pocky one chip.
Oh, yeah.
So I have 2 buddies who can handle the heat, and I was like, let's do it. And we did it, and it turns out for a white boy, like, that was not that hot. And so during the pandemic, I tried pretty much every challenge I could until I got to what's called the tube of terror, which is insanely hot. And that one was excruciatingly painful, and I didn't finish it.
Oh my God.
So I gave up that part, but I decided I want to try growing peppers, and I became obsessed.
Yes.
And now I'm very good at it,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a lot of them.
Yes, you even
And
sell them.
I sell them, and I started learning how to sprout vegetables and flowers, and like I just started learning. It taught me kind of like the human body really is just like, what do I need to do for this to grow and be really healthy and produce a lot of peppers? And sometimes it doesn't, and then I would be like, well, why? What happened? And find out and just get better at it. So it was
Wow.
again like teaching me how to be better at helping people. And then also during the pandemic, I renovated. I was bored. I wanted to do it, but it gave me plenty of time to renovate. I renovated my bathroom and my kitchen. And so I was like, well, how do I network? Number one, and how do I make more money? How can I combine those two things?
Mm-hmm.
So I started going on TaskRabbit, and I did basically turned into a whole side business of being a handyman. And in fact, the soccer team that I mentioned I met because through a handyman job, I met the father of the son, and we were talking, and that's how I got invited to do that.
Wow.
And so I gained a lot of that, and those two things were pretty transformational. And I like to rock climb,
Mm-hmm.
other things. So, and
I
I
think
read.
the pandemic really obviously was a traumatic time for everybody, but I also think it was a time for people to reset
Mhm.
and to really be introspective and look into themselves and um, learn and grow and change. I know that it really struck the fitness industry hard. Obviously, if you couldn't be in a gym and you couldn't be training, what do you think you learned from that time? And how do you think you're different now?
I mean, life is going to be full of challenges, no matter what. So you have a choice. You can either, run from it, like pull back in fear, or you can grow.
Mm-hmm.
And it taught me how to grow more because there were times when, owning a house actually helped me because you could go on forbearance and not do that kind of thing. But it taught me to be more resourceful and not necessarily be afraid of some of the daily things when you have challenges. Like it's not life or death, and you're going to figure it out. And I probably wouldn't have, I accelerated my ability as a student. I got to be a better student is what I'm trying to say. So I read, like I pretty much listen to books all the time.
Me too.
I hardly ever listen to music anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I have just books everywhere. And I watch like YouTube videos or stuff to learn things. And the pandemic kind of taught me that attitude that I can gain new skills. I can do new things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to just be who I was. I can be whoever I want, and I can go get it. And so can all of your audience. If you have a training goal that you want and it's not happening, you don't fail until you stop trying, right? You just haven't found the best way to do it yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, give me the latest book you have been reading.
I'm reading I'll give you a couple of them. I own a house. I want to buy more investment properties. So I'm listening to a real estate investing book from there's a famous podcast, and actually I'm listening to a couple books on that. And then I got into politics just because I like to know what's going on. And I found this, so far I think it's pretty good, but I'm not far enough along. It's called All the Worst Humans. It's about a guy who was he is a PR rep for like the worst like terrorists and stuff.
Oh my gosh.
But he's talking
PR for terrorists. I didn't even know that was a thing.
He's talking about his experience, and you learn a lot about how things, you learn a lot of things how things work above the day to day. And that book has been pretty interesting. And then there's a number of books that I go through over and over again, like Jim Rohn, The Data Will Turn Your Life Around, or The Tao of Abundance.
So you've really gotten into Tao Taoism.
I mean, I've listened to that book countless times. I've listened to Jim Rohn countless times. Those and the Four Agreements is one that I like to listen to.
I love the Four Agreements. I
on
recommend
Audible,
that. Oh,
the guy who narrates, if they have a good narrator, it can be really powerful. And yeah, so I think
yes.
you probably agree, I would imagine. But once you find the ones that you think these are the ones that I resonate with,
Yes.
you got to go through them over and over because there's so much. Like, you don't get a book one time.
Yes.
You got to read it over and over to get all the concepts. And even still, I listen to stuff and I was like, this was in there before?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't remember this part. And then it hits different. And then you're starting to maybe change again.
Totally.
So
I have a good one for you.
Okay.
It's called The Courage to be Disliked. And I can't remember the authors. There are two Japanese authors. But it's all about Adlerian psychology and the inferiority complex, superiority complex, and just kind of how it's kind of like a manual of how to live life. And I think you'd really resonate.
I think I would dig that.
With that one.
Yeah.
Well, we are out of time for the question part of our interview, but we would love to open it up to our audience members to ask Tom. It's time to pick Legs' brain. Do we have any questions? Yes,
more people are going to call me
Yay.
Legs now. Who has a question? Go for it.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I was just wondering, with your training, you were saying like you don't just jump into it with people. How long does it take you to like figure out like what that person's gonna need?
Usually, probably first appointment would be like 2 or 3 hours.
And give a little bit more about what that 2 or 3 hours looks like.
I want to know as much as I can about what you want, why you want it, and what you're doing, what you're not doing, and so forth. And then based on what comes up in that conversation, we might go down and see what's happening with you, and maybe even have So Ian came up with one concept that was really revolutionary for training that originates from Ian King, is the lines of movement concept. And it's a way to analyze a strength program and to determine how balanced it is. And so sometimes I might go through a program with somebody and we'll analyze it together. And it's usually pretty eye-opening for them because you can see how unbalanced a lot of training programs are. Now, sometimes you do it on purpose. You unbalance it. I'm not saying it's always going to be a cookie cutter 1-for-1, but that's one example.
Okay. Who else?
Thank you.
Go for it.
Come on down. You can see our mic right there. Okay, great.
Oops, I should put that down. Tom,
Hey, Jeff.
I know you haven't interviewed me, so you wouldn't know a lot of these, wouldn't know much, but generally speaking, you mentioned something that's really interesting to me, something I struggle with all the time, trying to rebuild my body and stuff. No pain, no gain versus listening to your body and stuff like that. I mean, as you're walking, you're sitting here going, okay, I'm getting tired. I'd love to rest, but I got to keep going because I know it's going to make me stronger. What am I listening for? What am I really trying to figure out? What in your best advice is the best line?
Well, there's a couple things maybe in that question. There's a difference between injury pain and, I'm getting a little burn or tired from training. So you do need to learn to differentiate the two. And there's also learning how to push yourself mentally. Now, it might not be appropriate for everybody to push themselves beyond what they're capable unless they're in the right frame of mind, right? If they learn how to make better choices. So that can be an individual thing. Like, when do you learn to improve your capacity to do stuff, right? Because that's what training will improve, your capacity to, let's say, walk further or lift more weight or whatever else. But if you have limiting factors that are going to be risk factors that outweigh pushing through, you might need to do other things first. So how do you know is you just start turning up the volume, let's say that as an analogy. because you got to start connecting the dots as to what it means, why you're feeling a certain thing, and what caused it, and what you can do differently, or just seek to understand it. Did that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pay attention to your body.
Yeah, I think just listening to your body's signals is probably one of the most important things that anyone can adopt. And it really just requires you to be conscious and aware of your body. So noting, is this actual, like, real physical pain, or is this soreness?
This hurting but getting better?
Right.
Or is this like, I need to take a break? Yeah.
Well, I'll give you another example too. There is a concept in strength training called delayed onset muscle soreness. So when you do strength workouts, the effect of it, the soreness doesn't fully set in for a couple of days. So the effect of what you've done doesn't show up for a few days. So you can also develop a better appreciation for the time period in, like, when the cause and effect. A lot of people say, if they had an injury, what caused it? Oh, I was running and my knee, whatever. No. What caused it? Not when did it happen. So you want to understand the cause.
Where the pain is. Got it. I thought I felt someone behind me.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Hello. Mine's a two-part question. I don't know if you've covered the first one. What would be your ideal client? And the second part would be, what would you like for yourself and your business to be like in the next 5 years?
Good questions.
Very good questions.
People do ask me this, and I try not to be vague. Just like when people ask me what is physical preparation versus training, the main thing I want to know when I talk with a client, because I generally have a conversation with someone first to find out if I want to work with them and whether we're a good fit together, is whether they have a challenge that they can't solve and whether they are really looking for a solution. Like, are they the type of person that if I help them with stuff, they're going to go and like really apply it? Or are they just looking for like the trainer that's going to count their reps and make them feel good in the morning because they have a friendship or whatever, which is all good. But I do want them to be driven to solve their problem. So I try to find that out. There is an aspect of, are they going to be able to pay me? Sometimes I want to help people for free, but that's one. But the big one is really like, do they want to solve this problem, and have they been able to elsewhere? What have they done about it? And then are they willing to do things differently? Because I'm going to do things differently. And are they going to reject that, or are they willing to try some things? So that's the way I would say it. And they can be a general pop or athlete, but that's the main thing. Okay. And then what would I like my business to be? Did you say in the next 5 years, did you say?
Yes.
Well, I'll give you more or less in total bodies. So I would like to have 100 clients, but this is another area that I'm not like a personal trainer. You don't buy packages of sessions with me. I am task-based, so it's time-based, and you decide how much time you want to spend with me. So some people don't see me all the time. They get a little help, go do it, come back if they want. So having 100 bodies doesn't mean that I would be training 100 people in a week. But I'd like to be at that point.
Well, if people want to work with you, how do they find you?
I guess I can give them my Instagram, maybe, which is coach.tom, T-O-M-Legath, Legath, hence the legs. Yeah, I guess that's the best way. And then you can message me there.
And you have a website too, correct?
Yeah. My website is kind of a work in progress. I don't really use it a lot. I would say if you want to learn more about what I do, go to kingsports.net. Okay. That's the better one. And I'm on there if you go to our coaches, but that will really give you a better impression of what we do as KSI coaches than my website does.
Okay. Well, we are out of time, I believe. Yes, we are. But But I am so grateful to learn more about you. And I especially loved learning a little bit more about you personally and getting to know this side of you that I didn't really know before. This very introspective reader, someone who's very curious about the world, someone who's learned a lot after, a very important person in your life passed. It's lovely to see the well-rounded you along with the professional you. And that's, a whole reason why we do this podcast is for people to really understand the person behind the trainer or the therapist or the coach. Who are you and where did you come from and what has inspired you so that we can inspire others as well. So thank you so much, Tom. And thank you for tuning in to the ANEW Body Insight podcast at City Club Los Angeles. And we look forward to our next exciting interview. And we really hope you join us next time. Thank you so much. Wow. Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Body Insight podcast. Please remember, the content shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Body Insight podcast tab. Follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.